No one noticed the little girl sitting at the corner table. Plates clattered. Glasses chimed. Laughter filled the restaurant. She sat perfectly still beside the Mafia boss, hands folded, eyes lowered like she'd learned long ago not to take up space. The waiters rushed past her. Guests spoke over her. One woman even waved a hand and said, "She doesn't talk anyway." The girl didn't react. She never did. Then the waitress stopped. Not because she recognized the man at the table, but because she saw the girl's hands move. Small, careful, a gesture no one else in that room understood. The waitress froze. She set the tray down slowly, knelt beside the table, and signed back. The little girl's head snapped up. Her eyes widened. Her hands began to shake. For the first time that night, she smiled. The Mafia boss turned, confused then stunned as he realized the two of them were having a conversation his power, his money, his fear could never buy. And when he understood what his daughter had been trying to say all along, his world cracked open. Stay with me until the end. Because what the waitress says next in sign language will change the fate of that child and the man who rules the city. Before we begin, don't forget to like this video, hit subscribe, and comment where you're watching from. Now, let's get into it. The Golden Crown restaurant was the kind of place where secrets died and deals were born. Crystal chandeliers cast dancing shadows across white tablecloths, while men in expensive suits leaned forward to whisper things that could topple governments. But tonight, all that power and intimidation meant nothing to a 23-year-old waitress named Sarah Chen. She'd been working at the Golden Crown for 8 months, long enough to recognize the faces that commanded fear throughout the city. Vincent Romano sat at table 12 every Thursday night, always alone except for the small figure beside him. Sarah had served him dozens of times, watching him bark orders at lieutenants, negotiate territories over wine, and conduct business that made seasoned criminals nervous. But she'd never really looked at the child. Sophia Romano was 8 years old, with dark curls that framed a pale face and eyes that seemed far too old for someone who should still believe in fairy tales. She wore expensive dresses that hung perfectly on her tiny frame, custom-made shoes that never seemed to touch the floor, and jewelry that cost more than most people's cars. Yet she moved through the world like a ghost, present but unseen, breathing but somehow not quite alive. Tonight started like every other Thursday. Vincent's men had swept the restaurant beforehand, checking every corner, every face, every possible threat. The regular customers had been quietly relocated to different sections, leaving the boss and his daughter in their usual spot by the window where Vincent could watch the street, and she could stare at nothing at all. Sarah balanced her tray carefully as she approached their table. Vincent was deep in conversation with his consigliere, Marcus, discussing shipping routes and payment schedules in the coded language that had kept their organization untouchable for decades. Sophia sat beside her father like a beautiful statue, her small hands resting motionless in her lap. The restaurant hummed with its usual Thursday night energy. Business leaders celebrated deals at corner tables. Young couples shared intimate dinners by candlelight. Families gathered for special occasions, their laughter mixing with the gentle piano music that drifted from the bar area. It was the perfect cover for the kind of conversations that happened at table 12. Sarah had learned to move efficiently around the Romano table, refill the wine without interrupting, clear plates without making eye contact, remain invisible while staying attentive. It was a delicate dance that had kept her employed, and more importantly, alive in a job where asking the wrong question could have permanent consequences. But something was different tonight. As Sarah reached for Vincent's empty glass, she caught a glimpse of movement from the corner of her eye. Sophia's hands had shifted slightly, her fingers forming shapes that looked almost like words. Sarah paused, her own hand frozen halfway to the wine bottle. The gesture was so subtle that anyone else would have missed it. A quick movement of fingers, a positioning of hands that lasted barely 2 seconds before Sophia returned to her statue-like stillness. But Sarah had seen it clearly, and recognition hit her like lightning. That was sign language. Sarah's mind raced back to her childhood, to Saturday mornings spent at the community center where her younger brother Danny had learned to communicate after losing his hearing in a car accident. She remembered sitting in those classes, absorbing the graceful language of hands and expressions, while her parents struggled to connect with their suddenly silent son. Danny had taught her that sign language wasn't just about words. It was about connection, about being seen and heard in a world that often overlooked those who couldn't speak aloud. Sarah had become fluent by necessity, driven by love for her brother and a determination that he would never feel alone in his silence. Now, 8 years later, she was watching another child trapped in that same isolation. Sophia's fingers moved again, more deliberately this time. Sarah's breath caught as she recognized the signs. The little girl was signing "please" over and over, so quietly and carefully that her father couldn't see the movement beside him. Sarah's heart shattered. Here was a child sitting next to one of the most powerful men in the city, surrounded by luxury and protection, yet completely alone. No one was watching her. No one was listening. She was invisible in plain sight, trapped in a silence that had nothing to do with her ability to hear and everything to do with a world that had decided she didn't matter. The realization hit Sarah with devastating clarity. Sophia Romano wasn't mute by choice or medical condition. She was mute because no one had ever bothered to learn her language. Sarah glanced around the restaurant. Vincent continued his intense discussion with Marcus, their voices low but urgent as they planned something that would probably be front-page news if the wrong ears overheard. The other diners were lost in their own conversations, their own worlds, their own problems. No one was watching the little girl whose hands were crying for help. Sarah made a decision that would change everything. She set down her tray with deliberate care, the soft clink of glass on wood barely audible over the restaurant's ambient noise. Then she did something that violated every rule of survival she'd learned working in Vincent Romano's territory. She knelt down beside the table, bringing herself to Sophia's eye level. The little girl's eyes widened in shock. In 8 years of life, no adult had ever voluntarily lowered themselves to her world. Waiters reached over her. Adults spoke around her. Even her father's attention was always directed elsewhere, toward business, toward power, toward anything except the small person sitting beside him. Sarah's hands moved slowly, carefully forming the signs she hadn't used in years. "Hello, beautiful girl. Are you okay?" Sophia's reaction was immediate and heartbreaking. Her carefully composed mask crumbled as tears filled her dark eyes. Her small hands flew up from her lap, trembling with excitement and desperation as she began to sign back rapidly. "You can see me," Sophia's hands said. "You can understand me. I've been trying to tell them for so long, but nobody knows what I'm saying." The conversation between Vincent and Marcus continued above them, the two men completely oblivious to the miracle happening at their feet. Around them, the restaurant carried on its normal rhythm, but for Sarah and Sophia, the world had suddenly become very small and very quiet. "I see you," Sarah signed back, her own eyes filling with tears. "I've always seen you." Seen you. Sophia's hands moved faster now, years of suppressed communication pouring out in a torrent of silent words. Sarah struggled to keep up, her own signing rusty from disuse but her heart understanding every gesture. "I know things," Sophia signed, her small fingers trembling with urgency. "Bad things. People think I can't hear them talking because I don't speak back. But I hear everything. I see everything. And I've been so scared." Sarah's blood ran cold. She glanced up at Vincent, still deep in conversation with Marcus about shipping schedules and territorial disputes. Neither man had noticed the transformation happening right beside them. "What kind of things?" Sarah signed carefully. Sophia's eyes darted toward her father, then back to Sarah. Her hands moved slower now, more deliberately. "The man with the scar comes tomorrow night. He's going to hurt Papa. I heard him on the phone in Papa's office. He thinks Papa doesn't know, but I was hiding behind the curtains. The weight of what Sophia was revealing hit Sarah like a physical blow. This child had been sitting silent at these dinners for months, absorbing information that could topple criminal empires or save lives. She was an invisible witness to conversations that grown men would kill to overhear. "How long have you been able to sign?" Sarah asked. "Mama taught me before she died," Sophia's hands replied. "She said it was our secret language. But when she got sick, Papa sent me to doctors who said I needed to learn to speak normally. They tried to make me stop signing. They said it wasn't proper for a Romano." Sarah's heart clenched. She could picture it perfectly. Medical professionals and speech therapists, all well-meaning but completely missing the point, trying to force this child into their narrow definition of communication, while ignoring the beautiful, complete language she already possessed. "Nobody else knows you can sign?" Sophia shook her head. "Only Mama, and now you." The conversation above them was growing more intense. Vincent's voice dropped to a dangerous whisper as he leaned closer to Marcus. "The Castellanos think they can move product through our territory without permission. They're wrong." Sarah realized she was witnessing exactly the kind of planning session that Sophia had been silently observing for months. The little girl wasn't just lonely. She was carrying secrets that could get them all killed. "Sophia," Sarah signed slowly, making sure she had the child's full attention. "The man with the scar. What else did you hear?" The little girl's face grew pale. Her hands moved in quick, nervous gestures. "He's working with Uncle Marcus. They want Papa gone so they can take over everything. Uncle Marcus pretends to be loyal, but he's been planning this for a long time." Sarah's eyes flew to Marcus, sitting less than 3 feet away, nodding sympathetically as Vincent outlined his plans for dealing with rival families. The betrayal was happening in real time, and only an 8-year-old girl and a waitress knew the truth. "Tomorrow night, during the family dinner at the house, the scarred man will come to the back door," Sophia continued. "Uncle Marcus will let him in. They think I'll be upstairs sleeping, but I always hide on the stairs to watch when Papa has important meetings." The complexity of the situation crashed over Sarah like a wave. She was holding information that could save Vincent Romano's life, but she was also a civilian caught in the middle of a war between criminals. Getting involved could mean death. Staying silent could mean watching a child lose her father. But as she looked at Sophia's trusting eyes, the decision became clear. "We need to tell your papa," Sarah signed. Sophia's hands froze mid-gesture. Terror flooded her small face. "He doesn't." "No, I can sign. He'll be angry that I've been listening. He'll send me away." "Sweetheart, your papa loves you. He won't send you away." "You don't understand." Sophia's signs grew frantic. "Papa thinks I'm broken. The doctors told him I might never be normal. If he finds out I've been understanding everything but not telling him, he'll think I'm lying. He'll think I'm sick, like they said." Sarah's heart broke for this brilliant child, who had been convinced she was damaged simply because she communicated differently. She could see the years of isolation, the medical appointments where adults discussed her as if she wasn't there, the gradual erosion of her self-worth as everyone around her focused on what she couldn't do, instead of celebrating what she could. Above them, Vincent was wrapping up his conversation with Marcus. "Thursday next week, same time. We'll discuss the final details then." Marcus nodded, his expression perfectly crafted to show loyalty and concern. "Of course, Vincent. Whatever you need." Sarah watched this performance with new eyes, seeing the calculated deception that Sophia had recognized months ago. The child's intuition and observational skills were remarkable. She hadn't just learned sign language. She'd become a master at reading people, at detecting lies and hidden motives in a world where survival depended on such skills. "Sophia," Sarah signed urgently as she heard Vincent's chair scraping against the floor. "Your papa needs to know about Uncle Marcus. It's the only way to keep him safe." The little girl's hands trembled as she signed back. "Will you tell him? Will you help me explain?" Sarah's mind raced. In about 30 seconds, Vincent Romano would stand up. Marcus would make his excuses, and they would part ways. Tomorrow night, if Sophia was right, Vincent would walk into his own execution because he trusted the wrong person. She had to act now. Sarah stood slowly, her legs unsteady from kneeling. Vincent looked up as she rose, his expression shifting from mild annoyance to sharp attention as he noticed her proximity to his daughter. "Sir," Sarah said quietly, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "I need to speak with you privately. It's about Sophia." Vincent's eyes narrowed. Marcus shifted in his chair, suddenly alert. The atmosphere at table 12 had changed completely, tension crackling like electricity before a storm. "What about Sophia?" Vincent's voice was dangerously quiet. Sarah glanced down at the little girl, who was watching with wide, terrified eyes. Everything hung in the balance. One wrong word could destroy the fragile trust she'd built with Sophia, but staying silent would mean watching a family torn apart by betrayal. "She has something very important to tell you," Sarah said, "and she's been waiting a very long time for someone to listen." Vincent Romano's world stopped spinning. His daughter, his silent, broken daughter, was having a conversation. Her hands moved with purpose, with intelligence, with a fluency that shattered every assumption he'd carried for 8 years. "What did you just say to her?" His voice cut through the restaurant's ambient noise like a blade through silk. Sarah felt the weight of every eye in their section, turning toward table 12. Conversations faltered. Silverware clinked to a halt. Even the piano player seemed to sense the shift in atmosphere. "I asked if she was okay," Sarah said quietly. In sign language, Vincent stared at his daughter, who had shrunk back into her chair, her brief moment of joy evaporating under her father's intense scrutiny. Her hands folded back into her lap, the familiar stillness returning like armor. "She doesn't know sign language," Vincent said, but his voice lacked conviction. "The doctors said she was delayed, cognitively impaired. They said she might never communicate normally." Sarah's jaw tightened. She'd heard this story before, had watched her own brother endure similar assessments from professionals who measured intelligence by their own narrow standards. "Sir, with respect, your daughter communicates beautifully. She's been trying to tell you something important." Marcus leaned forward, his face a mask of concern that Sarah now recognized as expertly crafted deception. "Vincent, maybe we should discuss this privately. The child seems overwhelmed." But Sophia's hands were moving again, trembling as she signed directly to her father. Vincent couldn't understand the words, but he could see the urgency, the desperation in her small gestures. "What is she saying?" Vincent's question came out rougher than intended. Sarah glanced at Sophia, who nodded almost imperceptibly. The little girl's eyes held a mixture of terror and determination that belonged on someone much older. "She's saying that someone close to you is planning to hurt you. Tomorrow night, during your family dinner." The restaurant seemed to hold its breath. Vincent's face went deadly still, the kind of calm that preceded violence in his world. Marcus shifted slightly, his hand moving toward his jacket in what might have been an unconscious gesture. "That's impossible," Marcus said quickly. "Vincent, the child is confused. Maybe she overheard something on television or—" "Uncle Marcus," Sarah interrupted, watching his face carefully. "Sophia says you've been planning this for months." Marcus's carefully constructed facade cracked for just an instant. His eyes flicked to Sophia, then to Vincent, calculating odds and distances. It was enough. Vincent Romano hadn't survived 20 years in his business by ignoring warning signs. He'd built an empire on reading people, on detecting lies, on knowing when someone close to him was preparing to strike. But he'd been blind to the most important voice in his world because he'd been told that voice didn't exist. "Sophia," Vincent said quietly, his voice gentler than Sarah had ever heard it. "Look at me, baby girl." The little girl raised her head slowly, tears streaming down her cheeks. Her hands moved in small, hesitant gestures. "She's apologizing," Sarah translated. "She says she's sorry for listening to your meetings. She's sorry for keeping secrets. She's afraid you'll send her away." Vincent's expression crumbled. 8 years of distance, of assuming his daughter was lost to him, of treating her like a beautiful, broken doll instead of the intelligent child she'd always been. The weight of it crashed over him like a physical blow. "Tell her," Vincent's voice cracked. "Tell her that I'm the one who's sorry. Tell her she's the smartest person at this table, and I've been too stupid to see it." Sarah's hands moved, translating his words. Sophia's eyes widened in disbelief, then filled with hope so pure it was almost painful to witness. Marcus made his move. The gun appeared in his hand with practiced smoothness. But Vincent had been expecting it. Years of paranoia and survival instincts kicked in as he dove sideways, pulling Sophia with him. The first shot shattered the wine glass where Vincent's head had been seconds earlier. Chaos erupted through the Golden Crown. Diners screamed and dove for cover. Chairs crashed over. The piano stopped abruptly as the player fled toward the kitchen. Sarah found herself pressed against the overturned table with Vincent and Sophia, her heart hammering against her ribs. "You always were too sentimental, Vincent," Marcus called out, his voice carrying over the panicked shouts. "That little freak should have been institutionalized years ago. She's seen too much, heard too much, just like her mother." The mention of Sophia's mother sent rage flooding through Vincent's features. Sarah watched him transform from protective father back into the predator that had built a criminal empire. But he was trapped behind the table with no weapon, and his daughter to protect. Sophia's hands moved frantically, signing something urgent. "She says there are 2 more men coming through the kitchen," Sarah whispered. "She saw them outside earlier with Marcus." Vincent cursed under his breath. Marcus had planned this perfectly, using the family dinner as cover while positioning backup in case things went wrong at the restaurant. The kitchen entrance was blocked. The main exit would put them directly in Marcus's line of fire. "The wine cellar," Vincent muttered. "There's a service tunnel that connects to the building next door. But they'd have to cross 20 feet of open floor to reach the cellar stairs. 20 feet under Marcus's gun, with Sophia slowing them down. "I can create a distraction," Sarah whispered. "Absolutely not. You've done enough." Sophia tugged on her father's sleeve, her hands moving in quick, determined gestures. "She has an idea," Sarah translated. "She says Marcus doesn't know she can move quietly. She's been practicing hiding from people her whole life." Vincent stared at his daughter, seeing her clearly for perhaps the first time. Not broken, not delayed, but adapted. She'd learned to be invisible as a survival skill, had developed an intelligence that thrived in observation and silence. "What's her plan?" Sophia's hands moved in complex gestures, her face serious with concentration. "She'll crawl under the tables to the far wall, then knock over that large plant by the window. When Marcus turns to look, you run for the cellar." "No," Vincent said immediately. "I won't use my daughter as bait." "Papa," Sophia signed, and even Sarah could see the determination in the gesture. "I've been protecting myself my whole life. Let me protect you too." Vincent's internal struggle played out across his face. Every instinct screamed against putting Sophia in danger. But he could see the intelligence in her plan. Marcus would never expect a move from the child he considered a helpless witness. "Vincent," Marcus called out, "send the girl out first. She doesn't need to see what happens next." The cold calculation in those words made the decision for Vincent. Marcus had never intended to let Sophia survive this night. She was a loose end, a witness who'd absorbed too many secrets. Her perceived disability had been the only thing keeping her alive. "Okay," Vincent whispered to Sophia, "but you stay low, you stay quiet, and the second you knock over that plant, you run to the cellar. Don't look back." Sophia nodded solemnly, then surprised everyone by turning to Sarah and signing something quick and urgent. "She says thank you for seeing her. She says you gave her a voice." Before Sarah could respond, Sophia was moving. She slipped under the tablecloth with the fluid grace of someone who'd spent years making herself invisible. Vincent watched his daughter navigate the chaos with skills he'd never known she possessed, avoiding the panicked diners and overturned furniture like she was dancing through an obstacle course. She reached the far wall just as Marcus began scanning the room more systematically. His backup was emerging from the kitchen. Two men with guns drawn, blocking the obvious escape routes. The crash of the ceramic planter hitting the marble floor was tremendous. Soil scattered across expensive tiles, and the ornamental tree toppled with a satisfying thud that drew every eye in the room. Marcus spun toward the sound, his gun tracking the movement. "What the hell?" Vincent moved like lightning. 8 years of desk work hadn't dulled his reflexes entirely. He sprinted across the open floor in a low crouch, Sarah close behind him. The cellar door was heavy oak, ornate and expensive like everything else in the Golden Crown, but it opened smoothly under his desperate hands. They tumbled down the narrow stairs just as Marcus realized he'd been outmaneuvered by a child. His roar of rage echoed through the restaurant, followed by the sharp crack of gunfire as he put bullets into the cellar door. The wine cellar was dimly lit and filled with expensive bottles that Vincent had been collecting for years. Under different circumstances, he might have appreciated the irony of hiding among his treasures while his empire crumbled above. "The tunnels behind that rack," Vincent panted, pointing to a massive wine display that looked far too heavy to move quickly. Sophia appeared at the top of the stairs, her small form silhouetted against the chaos above. She'd made it to the cellar entrance, but the sounds of pursuit were getting closer. "Come on, baby girl," Vincent called softly. Sophia started down the stairs just as Marcus's voice echoed from above. "Check the cellar. They can't have gone far." Heavy footsteps thundered across the restaurant floor. Vincent grabbed the wine rack and heaved, his muscles straining against the weight. Bottles crashed to the floor, expensive vintages mixing with dust and fear. Behind the rack was a narrow opening, barely wide enough for an adult to squeeze through. Vincent had used it years ago for smuggling operations, back when he was building his territory. He'd never imagined it would become an escape route from his own lieutenant. "You first," he told Sarah, then lifted Sophia into his arms. The little girl wrapped her thin arms around his neck, and for a moment he was transported back to when she was a toddler, before the world had convinced him she was broken. The tunnel was cramped and dark, filled with the musty smell of old brick and forgotten secrets. They crawled through decades of dust and spider webs, following the narrow passage that connected the Golden Crown to the office building next door. Behind them, they could hear Marcus's men discovering the cellar, their shouts growing fainter as the tunnel stretched on. When they finally emerged into the basement of the neighboring building, Vincent's expensive suit was ruined, and his hands were bleeding from the rough brick walls. But Sophia was safe in his arms, and for the first time in years, she was looking at him with something other than resigned acceptance. "Papa," she signed, her small hands visible in the dim light filtering through a basement window. "I have so much to tell you." Vincent looked at his daughter, really looked at her and saw not the broken child he'd been told to expect, but a survivor, a witness, a brilliant little girl who'd been protecting both of them in the only way she knew how. "I know, baby girl," he said aloud, then attempted the sign Sarah had shown him. "I'm ready to listen." The sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder by the second. Vincent held Sophia close as they emerged from the basement into the alley behind the office building. The night air was cold against their faces, sharp with the smell of rain and distant smoke. Sarah checked both directions before stepping out. The alley was empty except for scattered garbage cans and a stray cat that bolted at their approach. But she could hear voices from the Golden Crown, Marcus's men coordinating their search. "My car's 3 blocks away," Vincent whispered, his voice hoarse from the dust and adrenaline. "But they'll be watching the streets." Sophia's hands moved against her father's chest, signing something urgent. "She says there's another way," Sarah translated. "Through the old subway tunnels. Her mother used to take her exploring down there when she was little." Vincent's expression softened at the mention of his late wife. "Elena always said Sophia remembered everything. I thought it was just wishful thinking." "Mama showed me the entrance," Sophia signed, her small hands precise despite their trembling. Behind the flower shop on Morrison Street, she said it was our secret adventure place. Sarah watched the interaction, seeing how Vincent struggled to follow his daughter's signs, but refused to look away. 8 years of missed conversations, of treating Sophia like she was absent instead of present, of making decisions about her life without including her voice. "Can you find it in the dark?" Vincent asked Sophia directly, attempting to sign the question himself. Sophia nodded eagerly, then her hands moved in a complex series of gestures. "She says she knows the way to your safe house upstate," Sarah translated. "She's been watching you plan escape routes for months. She knows about the cabin by the lake." Vincent stared at his daughter in amazement. How could she possibly know about that? Sophia's response was quick and matter-of-fact. "She says you talk about backup plans when you think she's not listening, but she's always listening. She's been mapping your entire operation in her head." The weight of that revelation hit Vincent like a physical blow. His 8-year-old daughter hadn't just been a silent witness to his business meetings. She'd been analyzing them, understanding the strategic implications, building her own mental database of his empire's vulnerabilities and strengths. "My God," he breathed. "She's been protecting us both this whole time." A shout echoed from the direction of the Golden Crown. Marcus's voice, frustrated and dangerous. "Check every building on this block. They can't have vanished. We need to move," Sarah urged. Sophia tugged on her father's sleeve, pointing toward a narrow passage between 2 buildings. Vincent hesitated, every instinct telling him to stick to routes he knew, streets he controlled. But those same instincts had nearly gotten them killed tonight. "Lead the way, baby girl," he said quietly. Sophia smiled, an expression so bright it seemed to illuminate the dark alley. For the first time in her short life, someone was following her lead instead of making decisions for her. They moved through the city like ghosts, Sophia guiding them through passages and shortcuts that most adults would never notice. She navigated with the confidence of someone who'd spent years observing the world from the shadows, learning the hidden geography of a place where being invisible meant staying alive. The Chatte flower shop on Morrison Street had been closed for hours, its cheerful daytime displays replaced by metal security grates. But Sophia led them to a service alley, where a maintenance cover sat partially hidden beneath scattered leaves. "Down there?" Vincent asked, eyeing the narrow opening with skepticism. Sophia nodded enthusiastically, then signed something that made Sarah smile despite their circumstances. "She says you might get dirty, but it's better than getting shot." Vincent couldn't argue with that logic. He helped Sophia down first, then Sarah, before squeezing his own larger frame through the opening. The tunnel below was wider than he'd expected, part of the old subway system that had been abandoned decades earlier when the city expanded its transit network above ground. 3 months later, Sophia Romano stood before the city council, her small hands moving with confident precision as she testified about the corruption she'd witnessed. Sarah translated every word while Vincent watched from the gallery, his empire dismantled, but his daughter finally free to speak her truth. Sometimes the most powerful voice belongs to the person everyone thinks can't speak. Sophia taught her father that strength isn't about being heard loudest, but about truly listening to those the world overlooks.